All right, so last night, the House officially passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework without attaching the Build Back Better plan, as was basically the entire strategy throughout this whole negotiation process that we have been following for months and months. So I want to get into exactly how this process unfolded, but just to summarize it before we get into the complex back and forths that have been happening over the last number of months, progressives and thereby the American people absolutely got dicked over in this entire process. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened last night and then talk about the mistakes that were made along the way. So foolishness here from Common Dreams. House passes infrastructure bill but postpones the Build Back Better Act, which was the bill that basically had all of these social spending portions from Democrats' agenda, which was completely gutted into oblivion, down from the $3.5 trillion number down to $1.75 trillion, with basically all of the most popular portions of that taken out. And now it is not even a guarantee that this completely gutted and hollowed out bill will pass at all. So what happened last night? Well, the U.S. House on Friday night passed a bipartisan physical infrastructure bill, but didn't bring the Build Back Better Act to the floor, sending just one half of President Joe Biden's two-pronged economic agenda to the White House with only a pledge that conservative House Democrats will vote for the party's broader social infrastructure and climate package at a later date. Again, completely vague, no real commitments here. And in fact, they add a little bit of a footnote at the end where they are basically saying that if the CBO score that comes back changes even a little bit, then they will no longer support the bill as it stands. So they say, due to the intransigence of a few right-wing House Democrats who made last-minute demands for additional fiscal information that could take weeks to obtain, and the acquiescence of Pelosi and Biden, a planned floor vote on the Build Back Better Act was shelved and reduced to a rule for consideration, which was approved in a party line vote. And prior to that, the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed by a tally of 228 to 206, with 13 House Republicans joining most Democrats in supporting this measure. And there were some progressives who voted against the BIF package without it being attached to the Build Back Better. And those were Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib. And notably, there are some pretty big names that are missing from this list, and we're going to hear from a couple of them in a minute here, but those are the ones who actually stood their ground somewhat, so they should get a little bit of credit for doing that, even though they already fucked up previous to this in letting us get to the point where something like this could even happen. But again, as they're describing, it was sort of a numbers game in the end. Pelosi was able to get enough House Republicans to vote for this so that these progressive squad members basically were completely negated in voting against it. But they continue here saying that for months, progressives have stressed and Democratic leaders had agreed that keeping both pieces of the legislation linked and passing them in tandem was key to securing Biden's entire agenda. Of course, Biden from the beginning said he wanted both bills on his desk at the same time. And again, not surprising at all, but basically the Democratic establishment, including Joe Biden himself, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, completely stabbed progressives in the back for trying to stick to that actual plan that they had announced from the beginning. But that's exactly what you can expect from the Democratic establishment. But they continue here saying that holding a floor vote on BIF and a mere procedural action on Build Back Better, progressives argued Friday, was a betrayal of the two-track strategy that opens the door for right-wing party members who are content with the passage of BIF to further weaken or completely abandon the already heavily gutted Build Back Better. So again, basically, now that the BIF has gone out of the House and to the Senate, there is absolutely no guarantee that the Build Back Better Act, the social spending plan, will get out of the House, let alone out of the Senate, past Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, without either being gutted down even further into oblivion or even passing at all. Okay, so Build Back Better is basically completely dead at this point. All you have is this completely gutted and ridiculously watered down infrastructure package. So now, what is actually in this infrastructure package? Because I have a lot of people who are telling me that this is some big, bold, major investment that's going to be transformational. Well, let's just get down to some of the numbers here, okay? So I pulled up a report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers. They do these all the time. These are the experts in terms of infrastructure and where our funding gaps actually are. So what do they have to say about what we should be spending on infrastructure, physical infrastructure right now? Well, they say, every 4 years, the ASCE estimates the investment needed for each infrastructure category to maintain a state of good repair and earn a grade of a B. Okay, keep that in your head. We are talking about getting a grade of a B, not A plus infrastructure. Okay, keep in mind, we are the richest country in the history of planet Earth. We should be going for an A plus plus infrastructure, but this is just to get us up to a grade of a B. And the most recent analysis reveals that while we've made incremental immediate gains in some of the infrastructure categories, our long-term investment gap continues to grow. We're still just paying about half of our infrastructure bill, and the total investment gap has gone from $2.1 trillion over 10 years to $2.59 trillion over 10 years. So Basically, again, what the report is saying is that over the next 10 years, in order to get our infrastructure to a grade of a B, just an average grade of infrastructure, right, not crumbling and destructed, you would need to spend $2.59 trillion in new spending. So what does Biden's plan actually invest in that? Well, it invests roughly $579 billion in new spending. So it's like 1/5 of the amount that they are estimating. And keep in mind, this is $579 billion over 8 years versus the 10-year window that they were just talking about. But again, roughly 1/4, 1/5 of the amount that the American Society of Engineers is estimating we need to get us to a grade of a B. So in other words, Joe Biden's infrastructure plan here is completely not even close to being good enough, basically, to get us to an average infrastructure in the richest, wealthiest country in the history of planet Earth. So that's why I say that it's pathetic. But on top of that, why it doesn't even make sense monetarily, if you want to say, well, we just don't have the money to spend what is potentially needed to get us to that A++ infrastructure. Well, they say here, by 2039, our continued underinvestment in our infrastructure at current rates will cost $10 trillion in GDP, more than 3 million jobs in 2039, and $2.24 trillion in exports over the next 20 years. So this is the cost of not investing more in infrastructure right now. This is the cost of investing 1/4 of what they are estimating we should be investing right now, okay? It will only cost you more down the line, and this is exactly why I say all the time on this channel, infrastructure is one of those investments when you're going to be doing deficit spending, basically, that pays for itself down the line, because it literally pays for itself in terms of contrasting that to what we are inevitably going to have to pay as consequences for not making those investments up front. So this is what I mean when I say that infrastructure investments pay for themselves here. But again, Biden's this Build Back Better, or this bipartisan infrastructure framework is completely inadequate for what the moment is actually calling for with our crumbling infrastructure around the country. Now, in addition to that, this is also a net negative on climate, okay? This is a net negative on climate. It is actually destructive on the issue of climate change. So basically, the entire justification that we had from the progressive angle was the only way that we will support this bipartisan infrastructure package, because it is net negative on climate change and doesn't address any of the social conditions within the United States. The entire deal was the Build Back Better plan was going to not only have to offset the damages from the climate change aspects in this bipartisan infrastructure framework, but then it was also going to have to represent basically our once-in-a-generation, as they are calling it, investment in tackling climate change. Now, Build Back Better, as I've been saying this entire time, it's not guaranteed that it is going to pass at all in any way, shape, or form. So all we are left with is a net negative bill on climate change, and here's how it is a net negative bill. So here from Prospect. So on infrastructure, a bad deal is worse than no deal at all, and this is exactly that bad deal. So what's in it? Well, they say of the $500 billion in new spending, the vast majority is going predictably to repaving roads, expanding highways, building out airports, and burnishing other fossil fuel heavy infrastructure, transportation, and land and water use patterns. There's money, too, to revamp the fossil fuel intensive parts of the energy grid. $79 billion is being bandied about as climate related, going to electric cars and decarbonization of the entire American grid system nationwide and other nominally green activity. But broken out, it looks even less substantial. And there's just $15 billion for electric vehicle infrastructure and electric buses. Again, this is over 8 years. And transit combined, $15 billion for all of those, for electric vehicle, electric buses, and transit. $15 billion over 8 years, along with $21 billion for resilience, $21 billion for environmental remediation that is pretty inarguably not climate related, and $73 billion for power infrastructure, some percent of which will presumably be green. And even at that generous $79 billion number, that means that 14% of the infrastructure package is being dedicated to environmentally aligned projects with electric cars and grid modernization, though those are the least ambitious parts of the environmental program. No major expansion of public transit, no major renewable power and generation programs, and the other 86% of the package is largely going to expand fossil fuel heavy infrastructure, including highways, ports, oil and gas reliant energy systems, and more. And this is how you arrive at an infrastructure package that's actually an environmental net negative. Over 6 times as much money is being dedicated towards going backwards on the climate fight than going forward, not only wiping out whatever progress is being made by the $79 billion, but sending us even further in the opposite direction. 6 times more in this bipartisan infrastructure package is going towards fossil fuel heavy industry than it is towards tackling climate change. That's all you need to know about this bipartisan infrastructure package, especially considering that the Build Back Better Act is all but dead right now. And on top of it being a net negative on climate change, also it's a privatization scheme. So they are literally paying for portions of this bill. And you can see here in Biden's own fact sheet, if you scroll down here to the pay fors, okay, proposed financing sources for new investment, see down here, public-private partnership, private activity bonds, direct pay bonds, and asset recycling for infrastructure investment. So in other words, they are going to be selling off public infrastructure to private entities in order to pay for new infrastructure. This is something that was tried, I think, in Australia, and it was an absolute abject failure in terms of sustainably funding new infrastructure. This is public infrastructure. It should be paid for by the public. It should be owned and operated by the public. They are choosing to privatize it in order to pay for this. So at the end of the day, it's basically just a giant privatization scheme, a slush fund for large fossil fuel heavy infrastructure projects, doesn't tackle climate change, and now you have absolutely no leverage. Progressives have absolutely no leverage by passing the Build Back Better Act. So there's no guarantee that there will be any adequate investment in climate change or really in infrastructure itself, even though they are using these bullshit methods to pay for it, basically. So it's not worth voting for at all. And so we get to who actually didn't vote for it. Well, again, just to repeat, we had Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib. You see here the GOP yeses, okay, not really important. You see some of the typical, anti-Trump Republicans, I guess. But let's hear from somebody who actually voted for this, a progressive who voted for this. So Representative Ro Khanna justify it. So he says, I was glad to vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, having received reassurances from both President Biden and House Democrats that they will vote for the Build Back Better Act once it has received a score from the CBO. This is delusional. I'm sorry, Ro, this is delusional, and I really think that he knows it is, because one, we know that the CBO score that is going to come out, in all likelihood, is going to make some mild tweaks around the edges in terms of how they are going to be thinking about how much this is going to be costing over the time period, okay? That is almost an inevitability. So if he's just receiving behind closed door reassurances from House Democrats that on the assumption that the CBO comes back with a good result, which is very unlikely to happen, that maybe then they will support it, okay? Well, they're probably just going to take the CBO scoring and use that as a justification to further gut out parts of the bill. What are you going to do then, Ro? Because you just lost all of your leverage by voting for this bipartisan infrastructure framework. So that's how delusional the mindset is of somebody who would support this current strategy and just on the assumption that Joe Biden and House Democrats are going to be true to their word when you literally just got stabbed in the back by Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and the rest of the Democratic establishment, who shoved this through, completely contradicting what the actual plan was on the dual track process throughout the entire negotiation process. So it's like he's getting cucked on getting cucked on getting cucked by the Democratic establishment. They completely go back on their word, and it just doesn't matter. He turns around the next day and he's arguing that he has reassurances from them behind closed doors. And even if it does get past House Democrats, then guess what? It's going to the Senate, where Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are openly saying right now that they don't support the Build Back Better plan in its entirety. So this is just straight up delusional. Like, I really just don't even understand how somebody who is as smart as Ro Khanna will be able to make such a disingenuous argument that he knows inevitably is not going to happen. So once again, we have a situation where progressives and therefore the American people get absolutely dicked by the Democratic establishment, who have completely abandoned basically all of the most popular portions of their bill while shoving through a privatization slush fund for the fossil fuel industry.